But World Obesity Day, which encourages us all to consider the impacts of tackling obesity, healthier, happier and living longer lives. 64% of British people are now overweight, like me, and 28% of them are obese. 48% of bigger people say they only see themselves represented as a joke, which knocks their self-esteem and eventually puts them off exercise. So how should we treat people who are a little bit on the larger size? Should we say, do you know what, I'd like you to lose a bit of weight, or you should lose a bit of weight? Certainly I have relatives who have made that point. I'm not allowed to mention them by name, but there's one in particular who always lets me know that she thinks that I should be eating a bit less and perhaps not eating as much rubbish, and that is probably a fair point. But how do we actually deal with obesity as a society? Because if we have 64% of people who are overweight and 28% of them obese, well, how do we have this kind of conversation? Is it okay to look at people, point at them and say you're fat? I don't think it is, really. So let's talk to Lynn By, who is co-founder of Fat Lad at the Back. I mean, I sort of was the fat lad at the back at one stage, and maybe I still am, but I was certainly someone who wasn't picked for many games teams, mainly because of my lack of ability at sport, but also because I was a tiny bit on the old chubbier side. So, Lynn, and not to make it all about me, of course, but I'm just talking about my personal experience in regard to this. I can certainly identify with it. Lynn, you're very welcome to TalkTV this morning. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So, I mean, how does the media actually represent this, do you think? Because I think in recent years, maybe we've been in a situation where people are a bit more understanding of this, especially because if you've got a majority of people who are fat or larger or whatever, and actually the language is an interesting thing in terms of how you talk about it. Do you talk about people who are heavier? What do you do? I mean, how do you think things are now, and what should they be, Lynn?
Okay, so I think we've got a long way to go. For the first time, actually, in a decade, I am now feeling a real sense of positivity around the whole fat issue. And that is, I've been bagging on about this for 10 years since we started Fat Lad, and I'm just starting to see that. And I think it's potentially because there are more influencers now online, and we're now starting to focus a little bit more on health and a lot less on weight. I think the danger of focusing on people's weight is that we assume everybody that's fat must be unfit and everybody who's thin must be fit. And we know that that's absolutely not correct. So I think this is brilliant because we're starting to have a conversation, but demeaning people and criticizing people and pointing the finger at them and calling them fat isn't helping. And that's what we have been doing for such a long time. So clearly we need to do something else, don't we?
Yeah, I think you do, and we do need to change the conversation, Lynn. But I mean, whose fault is it that people are overweight, do you think? I mean, I have overeaten. I have a sweet tooth. I'm someone who likes a lot of bread and a lot of beige food, as Julia Hartley-Brewer has pointed out on this station a number of times correctly. And I think that it's interesting because people do need to take some form of responsibility for their weight. And if we normalise this, we're actually saying it's okay to be unhealthy, are we not, Lynn?
So I get where you're coming from, and that's okay because that's what society has told us over the course of the previous decades and decades. This is the whole concept. If you eat too much and you don't do any exercise, you're going to get fat. But actually what we're now starting to understand is that there are many more factors which contribute to somebody's weight. And genetics play an enormous part in people's weight. So I'm not saying it's not your fault if you're fat, but what I am saying is it's a much more complex conversation to have just than the conversation which we have been having of you're clearly lazy and you must eat too much. So yes, people do need to take responsibility. They do need to try to have a healthier lifestyle. But just focusing on weight clearly isn't working, and it's something that's got to stop because it just makes people feel very dreadful about themselves. And if people are feeling bad about themselves, then we know that negative reinforcement doesn't work. Doesn't matter if you're a child or an animal or a drug addict or you've got alcohol problems, whatever it is, food is just one of those other things that if you negatively try to change attitudes, it doesn't work. So
what's the positive here, Lynn? What's the positive?
Okay, well, our positive as a brand, we have a great community. They are really positive. They are enthusiastic about cycling, and a lot of them are fat. They come in all shapes and sizes. But the point is, we've managed to get people who should not be cycling onto bikes. And we also have in that huge community of people, lots and lots of very, very fat, very, very fit people who do ultramarathons, they do triathlons, they cycle up Mont Ventoux, and, so they're doing lots of things, and they are really booking the trend. They're demonstrating to people that actually fat people can do sport, can enjoy sport, and can be really great athletes. That whole positivity that we've managed to create, we're demonstrating. We have converted people who have shunned exercise by being kind, by giving them a place to belong. We've converted them into cyclists, and they now have happier and healthier lives. They may or may not have lost weight, and actually that's not really the focus. The focus is about mental health, about overall health, about fitness, about getting out, doing social cycling, and basically just having a really nice and pleasant time.
Lynn, thank you. We're going to talk actually about anorexia a bit later in the programme as well, but thank you to Lynn Bye there, co-founder of Fat Lad at the back there, which is a brand of clothing. So we'll say bye to Lynn Bye. Thank you for that. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Tracy in North Somerset, who says, hi Peter, school children are still being taught low-fat diets are the healthiest. This was debunked years ago. Also, much overeating is emotion-related. We need to address the root cause with better mental health support. Couldn't agree more, Tracy. And there are good fats as well. I love Brazil nuts, for example. They're full of fat, but it's good fat. It's fat that your body can understand, rather than, eating a load of Haribo or whatever other brands are available. Thanks to Ash, who says what Matthew was... Oh, no, that's about something else. I've lost that one. There is an obesity industry, says Mick, whereby thousands of fanatics are employed on good salaries inventing ideas to frighten citizens into regimented eating habits and enforced control. Get a life and leave us alone. We're going to talk a little bit about anorexia later.